Hello and welcome to Once Upon a September. This month I am focusing on the small genre of retold fairy tales, which is my absolute favorite. It's a very weak spot of mine. So this is my discussion video, Retold Fairy Tales and Walt Disney, because I think it's a very interesting topic. I hope you find it an interesting topic too. And yes, it's a discussion video, so if you have an opinion on any of the things that I say, please state them in the comments below. I love to hear from you. To start off, I've heard many people complain about Walt Disney's versions of the classic fairy tales, how he demeaned and Disneyfied these darker, moralistic tales. Except for The Little Mermaid. I have noticed that no one ever complains about The Little Mermaid. In fact, even people who don't like Disney's versions of all the other fairy tales still appreciate Little Mermaid, that she finally gets her happy ending. Now, isn't that a bit ironic? These are the people who grew up on the Disney movies, only to pursue the originals in adulthood and find that they are not quite the romantic, happily ever afters they thought they were. Perhaps these people feel cheated, that these supposed classics they've known for so long are no more than wishy-washy fantasies with saccharine and unrealistic endings of what they were truly supposed to be. But I think it's more than that. Not only did they learn that the Disney versions were far from the originals, but the originals themselves left them hollow. The original stories are nothing like books today. They're only a few pages long, short on detail, with little or no character development, focused on imparting morals. I think they wanted something more. On the one hand, Disney seemed too perfect or childish or innocent, and on the other, the originals have given them this wonderful peek into a darker, perhaps more believable or pessimistic reality, but just a peek. So they start to wonder how they can bring them both together. They start to plan how they can change it into the story they want it to be, just, I think, as Walt Disney did. That is the real beauty of retellings. Not only do you get to add to a legacy you've loved for so long, but you get to infuse a piece of yourself into it. You tell the story the way you want it to be, and no one else can do that. You leave your handprint with it. Either your belief in happy endings, or your firm stance that life is sad but true. Fairy tales were originally used to teach children morals and values, or warn them against danger, or even to prepare them for the realities of adulthood. I think Walt Disney took these stories to impart his own wisdom to children, his own view of the world and how it should be, how people should be, in an effort to do just what the original fairy tales were meant to teach them. Only Walt was a very optimistic person. He showed generations a romanticized future, perhaps in the hopes that they would be able to help it come to pass. Personally, I think a lot of this resentment toward Walt Disney and his fairy tales are a change of the times. I think in Walt's day, people were more optimistic. They were susceptible to happy endings because they believed in them. More than that, Walt believed in them. And when he recreated these fairy tales, he infused them with a piece of himself, of his hopes and dreams, of his beliefs. The best example of this evolution of people's cynicism is Beauty and the Beast. Some people look at this and say it's the perfect story for Stockholm Syndrome. They want to see a more realistic version of this. I disagree, because that's not what this story is about. The idea of Beauty and the Beast is that people can change for love. I think this story especially has fallen into cynical behavior because people no longer believe this is possible outside of the movies. To an extent, I think they're right. Again, it's a change of the times. If people don't believe that they or others can change for love, they don't let it happen. Kind of a catch-22. And the reason I love this story so much is because it reminds me that some things are possible. Love is powerful enough to change someone for the better, but only if that someone allows it to happen. Only if that love for someone is stronger than the love they have for their old self. In case you haven't guessed, I adore Walt's versions. I grew up with fairy tales because of Walt Disney. I guarantee if the stepmother had been chopping up her daughter's feet, or if Sleeping Beauty was impregnated while she slept, I would have never grown up with them. Would your parents let you watch that as a child? And can you imagine a world without Disney movies? Without fairy tales? What an awful thought! Walt Disney enamored entire generations with his movies. But it's more than that. He taught them to retell tales. To take something that they didn't really like and make it into something even better. Something that they believed in, that they could look towards and be happy about. Before Walt Disney, there were no real retellings. I am convinced that it is only because of him that we have wonderful stories like Wildwood Dancing and The Ever Afters and Sisters Grimm. Recently, we've seen a creative explosion in retellings, not only of fairy tales, but in retellings of all kinds. Just look at the many versions of Sherlock Holmes, the Jane Austen companion novels, remakes of The Lone Ranger, Mission Impossible, and reimaginings of other long-kept classics. A wall has been broken down between what has been done and what is left to do, and we are beginning to realize the limitless possibilities of what we can do. We take old stories and figure out how to make them, if not better, at least new and more relatable to the current generation. What a beautiful concept. Some may argue that this is a lack of originality and creativity, but the art of retelling is a creativity all its own. It's a subtle thing that has to be balanced just right between originality and the originals. Think of them all. Not just fairy tale retellings, but all of them. The vast differences now in vampires and werewolves than what they were 20 years ago. Stories like Austenland and Jasper Ford's Thursday Next and Jack Sprat series. The idea of the retold tale is an art of the last few generations, and I believe it all started because of Walt Disney. I'm not saying that we should reinvent the fairy tales and forget about the originals completely. On the contrary, keep reading the originals. They're the foundations for this wonderful, crazy, vast genre that, to put it bluntly, is basically fan fiction. And what is the fun of fan fiction if you don't know the canon as a baseline? Fairy tales had an important function in their day, and they still fulfill that to an extent, just to a slightly older generation. But I don't see a problem with reimagining them and putting out a dozen different versions, because it's always fun to see what new twists somebody can add for your favorite tale. But that's just how I feel about it. What do you think?